Well, it was really almost cultural shock. We went from a dark hospital that was old into a bright new hospital that was brand new and state of the art at that time in '74. When I came in 1970, there was a big hole in the ground beside the red brick building, and we were going to start construction any day now. And but anyway, when we moved in, it was a blessing. The intensive care was nice and big. The one we had was adequate, but barely. The operating rooms were bigger and better lit, and more of them. The wards were really nice.
I trained to be an internist inside the walls of Brackenridge Hospital. Lots of great memories from my 3 years there. I stayed on an extra year after my residency as the chief resident. I trained in the old building that's still sitting over there now, and it was an older building then. I started in 2003, it had been built in the 70s. And yet there was a certain charm to the building. There was a certain, I don't know, family feel to the way the building was, and many, many longtime staff. And so it was truly a privilege to get to learn how to be a physician inside that building.
But I always knew when I got my nursing degree, I was going to work at Brackenridge Hospital. I had heard so much about Brackenridge Hospital, and I also had clinicals there, and I knew this is the patient population I want to work with. I'm learning so much, and I had never been around homeless patients. I had never been around people that, you know, came from other countries and were here under very unusual circumstances. So it really opened my eyes and helped me grow not only as a person but also as a professional. Brackenridge will also have a very special place in my heart because for the 12 years that I spent there, I also met my husband, and we now have 2 children, and those are memories of meeting him that I will never ever forget.
And that day they were super busy. Mm-hmm. I remember waiting in a waiting area. They wouldn't even give me a room because they were very, very busy.
Right.
I got the room, and the anesthesiologist,
yes,
he came in and he was ready. He gave me the epidural.
That's right.
And Dr. Gore had come in and checked my vitals.
I mean, every single thing, every single experience that we had there, it was something unbelievable. At one point, I thought my daughter was, we were going to lose her because of the heartbeat going down, and I was so concerned, so worried. But then again, the nurses, they were like, I guess they've seen this before, and they were so calm, they were so positive, and they said, it's okay, everything is going to be okay. So everything was done right, properly, and at the right time, and, you know, after that, this is what we have now, and so we're so proud.
There were constant renovations of that building. If you walked into that building today and we walked down through the ICU, you'd have to understand that ICU didn't exist when the building was originally built. It was added. A brand new ICU was built on the 6th floor of that building. That wasn't there when it was initially built. So and this was a hospital that nobody had ever thought about the fact that we would become technologically driven and computer dependent at some point in the future. And so there were challenges like, do you have enough outlets to plug in all the computers that everybody's rolling around? Lots and lots of work went into that building on an ongoing basis to try to keep it up. And it was remarkable, the things that were able to be done to that building to keep it up. There was a limit to that.
Well, our safety net and teaching hospital, Brackenridge Hospital, and now what is Dell Seton Medical Center at the University of Texas at Austin, have historically and traditionally been iconic parts of the community. The beauty is that it served as the foundation for us to jump off of back in 2011 and 2012. Back then, we put forward to the community an idea or a vision of 10 goals in 10 years One of the goals was to get a medical school in Austin, Texas. But a key goal was that we needed to have a 21st century modern teaching and safety net hospital. And of course, Brackenridge became Dell Seton just directly across 15th Street.
You know, Brackenridge has been a very important facility to this community for over 130 years. And it symbolizes something, and that is care delivery, trauma center, and also caring for the poor and the vulnerable of this community. And while that building may go away, the mission and spirit of what we're about and the community providers between Central Health, Ascension Seton, and the Dell Medical School remains the same.
It's a building, but it's going to continue to provide services to those who need it the most. And that's our mission. So the building will be gone, but the funds that it's going to be able to raise will provide services to those who need it the most.
Brackenridge has been part of healthcare in Travis County for many generations, and it will continue to be part of healthcare in Travis County for many more generations to come. People associate Brackenridge with this is where the old hospital used to be. But now with the new development, we're going to have a new way to be able to help fund our mission to provide healthcare for people here in Travis County.
I'm here today to say thank you to the doctors and the nurses, the EMT, everybody who helped save my life.
Cooperation with the city and our neighbors, we will begin deconstruction and demolition of the tower and other buildings here on this campus. And over the next several months, maybe a little longer, we'll start to give new shape to this place that carries on the same hope and the same mission.
There. Again, thank you everyone for being here tonight with us. Brackenridge Hospital held a special place in Austin. It was a landmark, and listening and hearing to the stories and what it meant to many Austinites, I want to assure you and to assure everyone, we will continue on carrying that spirit of caring and loving to our community in the work that we are doing on our campus. Tonight, you will hear what had been done in the past, where we are today, and our future plans. And we'll also provide you with an opportunity to share your thoughts. Just want to assure you that we are committed to our mission in fulfilling and providing care for those who need it most, and your voice matters in the work we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Manager Musaitiv. Manager Musaitiv, board member of Central Health. She is the chair of the Downtown Property Committee, part of the Board of Managers. So welcome, everyone. My name is Ivan Davila. I am the Director of Communications and Community Engagement here at Central Health. We're glad that you could take time out of your busy Monday evening to be with us today. Si necesitan traducción al español, por favor, levanten sus manos. Acá atrás tenemos traductores. We've got Spanish language translators in the back. We want to promote inclusion and diversity in our community engagement process. We want to make sure that we can hear from everyone. And so that's, that's very important for us and to us. Aside from Manager Musaitif, who's here today, I want to recognize Manager Dr. Zamora. He's the board chair. He's the chair of our board. Manager Valadez, thank you for being here. And Manager Jones, thank you all for being here tonight. And a couple of things. The bathrooms are outside around the corner. So if you need to use the restroom, just go out the door and around the corner. There's also some refreshments right here. So if you need some water, some iced tea or coffee, please feel free to get up and help yourself. Today, we're going to be hearing an update about our downtown property, and we're going to hear from some panelists, which I will introduce here shortly. Then we'll have some time for Q&A, and we'll have an opportunity to have a conversation with you all. please feel free to raise your hand and give us your name. If you're representing an organization, please feel free to let us know that. And also make sure that we can give you a mic. We are streaming this and we are also recording this, and so we need to be able to hear you, so we'll need to give you a mic. All right, without further ado, let me introduce to you our panelists. Mike Gillian is our President and CEO of Central Health. We also have Mr. Larry Wallace, who is the Enterprise Chief Administrative Officer. Please come to the front, Mr. Wallace. And we also have here tonight Mr. Stephen Lamp. He is the Vice President of Real Estate and Facilities. Mr. Giskin.
So thank you all. As they're coming up, I wanted to start out with a structure around some of the conversation. Some of you may be familiar with the master plan. Some of you may have been part of those community groups that was developed in 2015 and I think finalized in 2016, I believe, maybe earlier than that. But I get a lot of questions about, and when I'm out in the community, why is it that you're developing this property to begin with? So back behind me here is a picture of the old Brackenridge, and even the new Brackenridge, now the old Brackenridge, and then the hospital prior to that. And whenever this property was transferred from the city to Central Health in 2004, Central Health took possession of this, and that was a function of the hospital district being created and how properties, including the hospitals, had to be conveyed to the hospital district. And I'm mashing a lot of legislative history together. But then when the new teaching hospital was built right across the street, Del Seaton, that vacated this property. Now, it's not fully vacated. There are some operations happening in the clinical education center, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But in essence, that brings us where we are today, where you have a 14-acre tract. 2 of those acres, we have worked on short-term lease agreements to start generating revenue for our mission. But above all, I mentioned the master plan. As we think about what to do next, when I say we, it is a we exercise here. It's not just one person making this decision. As we think about what to do next on the remaining acres of this property, it's important to go back to the master plan. A lot of time and community effort was put into that plan. And if you look in the opening pages of that plan, and it's on our website, and we can tell you how to access that plan, it's about funding the mission of healthcare. And so we're keeping that front and center in our vision as we move forward. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, the master plan was put together with a lot of community input and a lot of facilitators. Some of you in the audience may have been working in a facilitating role or a consulting role. But this began 4 years ago, this comprehensive community effort. And through a number of meetings and online and different ways of collecting input, we came up with a master plan that's built around 3 principles. Mission, meaning mission of healthcare. Stewardship, which means, prudent and wise decision-making with assets that we have, and there's more spelled out underneath it in the master plan. And partnership, meaning we need to partner with each other in order to make this development successful. And so ultimately, our goal here with this development, in accordance with the master plan, is to generate a development. And keep in mind, we're on a multi-year time frame. If you look at the master plan, it takes us out to 2035. Now, we hope to be done a little sooner than that, but this is going to be a long-term endeavor. But what we hope to do is to generate revenue so that we can invest in healthcare in Travis County. Lastly, before I hand it over to Mr. Lamp, we have some blocks here, and this corresponds to the old historical city block section. And it's important to remember that as the board begins to consider how it develops the rest of the property, you'll see these blocks, but only because it corresponds with the old city blocks and it makes it easier to talk about the piece of property. But the reality is that any one of these blocks could be partitioned off and developed. And that's ultimately, I think, what the master plan talks about, because it envisions some of the shorter in height buildings being built first, and then the taller buildings being built in the second phases or the subsequent phases. And so the reality is that these blocks, they could be developed as one parcel, but they could also be broken up as well. And that's one of the options that the Board of Managers has built into to our instructions to us, which is give us all the available options when it comes to developing this property. If it's not all developed at once, what's the smart way to do it parcel by parcel? So just a quick orientation on what these different colors mean. This is the parking, just to orient yourself. This is 15th Street, so this is north. This is the parking garage right here, right across the street from the hospital. And this is required in order for the hospital to maintain their certification or their licensure. You have to have a parking garage for people, so this is part of that. These blocks here and here were leased to the 2033 fund, which gave us the ability to start generating income for our mission sooner rather than later, as opposed to waiting multiple years until the whole development was done. It was a great opportunity, which amounts to about $4 million, I think, in this first year alone, by the end of this fiscal year, to be able to fund Central Health's mission. So these two right here are under long-term ground leases. This space right here is currently being utilized by Seton as part of their clinical education enterprises. And then we have the remaining blocks here, which obviously are open for development. So I want to hand it over to Mr. Lamp to see if you have any comments on that, and you'll take us to the next slide.
Good evening, thank you. Basically, anything that's not occupied right now, we are planning to take down in terms of demolition. We have asbestos abatement ongoing, and then the balance of the site will be leveled. We are negotiating actively with the City of Austin on entitlements resolution. When we resolve all of that, then we will be able to basically have level sites ready for redevelopment. So this is the extent of planned demolition. This is existing parking garage that is leased. Anyway, we have a parking garage. This is attached to the certification of the Dell Seton Medical Center at University of Austin, so that's actually tied to a 60-year ground lease. This block 164 will actually be demolished by the 2033 fund. The balance of the orange area will be demolished by Central Health. We're working with the city on permits and authorizations at this point in time. We hope that demolition will start this summer. And if things go well, by the end of the calendar year at least, we will be ready to go with new development. And
I wanted to put some perspective to when we talk about funding our mission, and we're going to open it up. Actually, we'll have a few closing remarks, and then we need the conversation. Is when we talk about funding the mission for healthcare, it's really all of Travis County. It's not any one particular part, but it's also the individuals that we are privileged to serve, and that's everybody that's at or below 200% of federal poverty level. But I'd like to turn it over to Larry so he can put a little more context in a geographic sense about what it is that we aim to do with the proceeds from the campus.
Thank you. Before I talk about the map and what we're trying to do, let me just share a little bit of information about the cost of healthcare. In our country, we spend $3.2 million annually. That is almost 17% of gross domestic product. It's 5% higher than the next country. It amounts to a little bit more than $10,700 per person, the cost of health care. It used to be $146 back in the day. So that shows you how the cost of health care and to provide these services have risen. And the cost is really rising faster than average income. So think about those numbers. If you look at every dollar that is spent on health care, about 40% of it is in hospitals. Another 22% is with physicians and clinical services. 21% is on prescriptions and drugs. And the rest gets miscellaneous expense. So that's how our health care finances look in terms of what we spend. I think about 1 in 7 residents in Travis County has somehow benefited from Central Health and the services that we provide, knowing that we work through a network and multiple partners to get this work done. As we talk about the work that we're doing, This map just, it's there to talk about what our priorities are and what we're trying to do. Our focus is Travis County. And even though there is quite a bit of work being done in eastern Travis County, we're looking at Pflugerville, Jonestown. Believe it or not, there are people in Jonestown, which is west, that really need our services. We're everywhere. And so we have some priorities, which include Del Valley. And what that means is Creedmoor, Elroy, Austin Colony, Hornsby Bend, and those areas, as well as Colony Park. You hear us talking a lot about those efforts, and those are for priorities for us, but it doesn't mean that we're excluding everybody else. So how do we pay for this? The board, when the decision was made to move forward with the BRAC campus and our property, they developed some guiding principles. And one of those guiding principles was, we're going to use our dollars and get as much as we can so that we can continue to fund healthcare. It wasn't about investing and banking dollars for salaries. It was all about the money that we can put back in healthcare. So everything we do in this project, this is the only opportunity we get. If you look at what's happening locally in funding and statewide and federal, you see the trend. They're talking about property caps with health districts and what they can and cannot do. Our funding in the future is very uncertain. And so we have to fully take advantage of this opportunity that we have to gain revenue and income from this project. And as we develop the projects, keep in mind the intent is for all the dollars to be going back into healthcare so that we can continue to take services to people that otherwise haven't had it and very much need it. This population is growing. Don't have to tell you that. Everybody in this room understands. And it's not all about prosperity. And so we still have people that are low income, underserved, that need our services. So thank you, and please understand, this is really important work for us, and we have to maximize every dollar. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So, what's next? Our community engagement efforts will continue. As probably, this is not a task that will be done in the next year or so. Things will change rapidly as we go. We will continue on holding community conversations and discussions, and we want to be as transparent as possible with this redevelopment. And also putting in mind that serving their people are the essence of everything we do. And our commitment to building a health innovation zone in that property as well, that will enable us to feed into our mission in providing health care. As Mr. Wallace has alluded, the cost of healthcare is rising, and we need to think innovatively. How do we capture the most and yet provide the most efficient buildings or services for our community? And as I mentioned, we will continue on with our community engagement. In the next few weeks, we are scheduling in-person meetings with community organizations, neighborhood associations, and more. And we also will always welcome any feedback from our community. And our doors are always open. Either you want to meet us in person or email us. We welcome your thoughts, and your voice really, truly matters. And we'll continue sending you updates via email, and we'll also develop a special additional newsletter that will capture all our development plans. And as nothing is set in stone. As a board member and the chair of this committee, we have not made a final decision. All options are open, as long as it fulfills our mission. And please know that our master plan is and will continue to be the guide of our work. And thank you so much for being here this evening, and we welcome your questions, and thank you.
So let's open it up for some conversation. Who has a burning question? Dr. Cooper, hold on just a second. Yes, sir.
So, hang on. I want to make sure you have a microphone.
Yeah, let us get a microphone, please.
Thank you. What is the 2033 initiative? I'm not sure I know that.
Yes, that is that's a nonprofit that was set up, and Stephen checked me on this, but it's a nonprofit that was set up for the benefit of higher education at University of Texas at Austin. And the lead developer on this is a gentleman named Sandy Gottesman. And it was set up simply as just a benevolent, or I guess a nonprofit is the right way to put it. It's not making any money, but it was designed to facilitate the development on some of the blocks there and get some income coming in for us. That was the benefit for us. But Stephen, is there anything that you should add to that?
Yeah, that's the overall context. The initial, we're still under some NDAs or non-disclosure agreements. So we were initially chasing a third-party commercial tenant. Neither Central Health nor University of Texas nor other entities could respond rapidly enough. So Sandy Gottesman actually stepped in, created the 2033 fund. It's actually a support organization by federal taxation laws as a means to expedite potential capture of a commercial tenant. So we've actually entered into, Central Health has entered into a ground lease for 2 of the blocks, 167 and 164. And they are, I expect, groundbreaking or towards their new development this summer.
Stephen, can you explain how that agreement with the foundation expedited ground lease revenue for Central Health this year, whereas it could have taken 10 to 15 years?
We went through a preferred master developer selection program. And the short version, Ted, is we have already received revenue on Block 164 and 167. The structure of the ground lease is somewhat unique in that we are actually indirectly participating in the development revenue. So the size of the project increases revenue for Central Health. We have escalation clauses. So within a 4.5-month period, we negotiated and closed a ground lease agreement between Central Health and the 2033 Foundation. They have multiple agreements, sort of sub-agreements or tasks and information that we exchange on a regular basis. We have overall sort of conceptual design review. We are working collectively with the city to resolve entitlement issues for our mutual benefit. And it was really just the right thing to do. We have 15-year resets to protect us against escalation. It's actually an incredibly attractive agreement for Central Health.
Just really follow up about 2033 fund. I've met and spoken with Sandy Gottesman on multiple occasions, and every time we meet, he says that the work they are doing will ultimately fulfill our mission here in Central Health. So they're very committed to our mission, and that's probably what attracted us also as well to go into this lease. So that's what I just wanted to say.
Yeah, Tom Coopwood. When you talk about redeveloping the Brackenridge tract, are you just talking about 165 in the mechanical area, or do y'all have input into 167 and 164? And then I have another question.
Block 164 has been fully assigned by ground lease to the 2033 fund, so they have design rights over that. Candidly, their current plans are a commercial office building, I think 300,000 plus square feet plus underground parking. Block 167 is also controlled by the 2033 fund. We have overall purview, sort of a conceptual review of what they're planning, but we will not be controlling it directly. The balance of campus is open. Block 165, as Mr. Geeson pointed out earlier, these sort of orange diagonally shaped or diagonally hatched blocks are currently leased through Seton, and that extends through September of 2024. So we expect that that'll be a future development phase. Right now, the only pieces of land that are available are Block 165, and we'll be decommissioning our central plant, so that'll extend into Block 166 as well.
So you think Seton will relinquish that lease on 166 in the original block? Because they're going to need this parking garage for a long time, I guess.
Well, the 166 blocks ends at, the 166 block ends at 2024. Did you mean the parking garage at 168?
Well, this 168, I guess, is just going to stay with Seton for a long time until they build one. And then, but the original Brackenridge block, was that the one you were saying was gone in 224?
It's this one right here.
Yeah, but Seton is has to renew the lease in 224, or if they keep it, I mean, there's no reason they wouldn't keep it. And the second question I had is, have y'all thought about putting any medical facilities on Block 165, like a day surgery or a complex care clinic or other specialty care clinic or a short-term rehab for patients that just get out of Dale Seton and need some care, mostly our patients,
Sure.
I mean our clinic patients kind of.
Right. Before I answer that question, just for purposes of explaining how things are being shuffled around, there was currently a clinic, it was the Blackstock Clinic, that was in the professional office building, which was right here. And those operations were moved to the Southeast Health and Wellness Center here last month or a month before, I believe. So I would say, Dr. Coopwood, all of that's on the table. And if you go back and look at the master plan, it contemplates a mix of different uses, including medical, including healthcare. And it just stands to reason, and I don't want to bind future boards on this, but given that this is a long-term endeavor for us, taking us out at least another 20 years, but on paper, but hopefully a lot sooner than that, that given the medical complex that's going to be across the street with the medical school and the teaching hospital and other build-outs by UT, that we'll be able to capture on something like that and be able to leverage as much as we can on the healthcare side of it. I just don't think that we're at a point where we could go to the board and say, we need to go get a developer to build a clinic right here in this corner. We're just not to that point yet.
Hi, Ellen Richards. I'm with Integral Care. I'm curious if there's been a final decision on the alignment of Red River and where that's going to run coming through this piece of property. And if you could show that, that'd be great.
And I am happy to hand the microphone off to Mr. Lamp on this one.
We are in what I hope are the final stages of negotiations with the city on realignment of Red River. So the concept is basically, here's existing Red River extending from 15th Street north. Red River has 7 different components. Component 5 has already been constructed, and that's the extent of Red River that's between the new Dale Seton Medical Center and then the health education building on the opposite side of Red River. So portions 6 and 7 extend through our campus, and then a different portion actually extending south of our campus to 12th Street, and then the 4 other segments are between the city and UT. So the University of Texas and the City of Austin are in negotiations on an ILA appropriate to their transactions, and we are doing the same here. So I think, I'm hoping by the close of our fiscal year, so by the end of September, we will have an interlocal in place and we'll have everything resolved.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Patrick from the Sobering Center. So Sabine's, top couple questions. Sabine Street, where we're located, will that be a go through now? Once you get finished with your demolition, will that street go all the way through there, or are we still going to be blocked off like we are down at the end? Or do we know?
Short version is we do not know that.
Okay, so maybe not.
And and the answer is not to be elusive or avoid, but we're really trying to maintain long-term, the best flexibility and opportunity to respond.
Okay. And then in terms of your demolition, because I'm assuming you're demolishing all the structures all the way up to the back of Health South,
yes,
correct? And then the mechanical buildings, which is right there on our property line and impacts our neighbors next to us as well. So what kind of, I guess, plans to keep all that debris out of our area? Like, how is that going to work logistically? Because we have a lot of traffic coming in and out of there. We have a lot of things happening there. So is there a written plan? Can we get a copy of it? Who's going to do it? Et cetera, et cetera.
We have awarded a contract to a demolition contractor. We have not yet. We're still working with the City of Austin to obtain the necessary permits. And part of the permit application are site controls, sediment, water, and then haul routes as well. So traffic will be going in and out of the southwest corner of our property to the existing Red River, and then some will be going out Sabine Street as well. Unfortunately, we're not doing anything exciting. We're not doing an implosion, so it's not one big explosion and a cloud of dust.
I think
this will be mechanical demolition.
I'm looking at your little orange dotted lines and where my building is, and then I think about where does the ambulances park when they bring people over, where do the police park, logistics. So if we could have access to logistics, that'd be good. Then just for clarifying, because I wasn't quite sure, on 167 and 164, your ground leases, so there is a structure that's going up. Gottsman's putting a structure up on 164 and 167?
Yes, that's the design, ultimately. Now, there's still demolition that needs to be done here. This is where the hospital tower is.
And we know 164 is an office building, but we don't know what 167 is yet.
Is that correct? That's correct. But as Mr. Lamp said earlier, as part of the lease that we have with the 2033 fund, is there's some design control here. They have ultimately control under the lease, but they have to fit within certain design elements so that it fits with the rest of the property, but also sets the rest of the development up for success. And because we view that 164 and 167 as really strong starts to the rest of this development that's going to help the rest of the property. So it needs to look right. And 2033 was more than happy to accommodate that. Can I come back to your question, though, on the demolition, Rhonda? We probably all, you can't be in downtown Austin, even in the past, 5 years and not have been around some type of demolition of something. And so if you've got some specific concerns, you've talked to neighbors or you've been through this before, we'd love to sit down with you just to make sure as we're working through the permitting process, we're capturing things that are important to you and making sure that we're not missing anything, do the best job we can on this.
More questions?
Hi, I'm Chris Riley with the Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association.
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions. First, I want to ask about the grid. That we're seeing something of a grid on this map, although I'm sorry to hear that we're not sure whether Sabine will actually go through. And we're not even really sure about Red River being realigned. Do you expect that what was once 14th Street will be restored, and is there any hope of bringing back something like 13th Street below that? I mean, I guess the bottom line question is, do you foresee an urban grid being reestablished in this area?
So going back to I'll turn this over to Mr. Lamp to answer in more detail. But when you look at the master plan, Chris, it contemplates different pedestrian walkways. And so if one of the goals is to try to make this as pedestrian friendly as we can and try to minimize interior vehicular traffic, that does a couple things. One, it makes it space, obviously, that's more usable, to pedestrians. But two, in terms of going back to the core function under the mission part of this plan, which is to generate revenue, the more vehicular traffic that you open it up to, the more street space you have, obviously the less development space that you have to ultimately fund the mission. And I think that's what's contemplated in the master plan. Now, having said that, in terms of what the streets look like, a lot of that has to do with what we're able to work out with the city, and then whatever ultimate decisions the Board of Managers makes in terms of which direction to go with this development over the next several months. Stephen, is there anything else that I missed that you think might be responsive?
So let's suppose that by urban grid we mean rights of way and not necessarily for cars, but rather public rights of way.
Right.
Do you foresee an urban grid that would allow a public right of way in more or less the form that you aligned here with rights of way on 14th Street, Red River, Sabine, and 13th Street?
Take a stab at this one. Because you're using terms that our master plan says one thing, but you're using different terms. I want to make sure that we're talking your language. So,
The short answer is we don't know yet. It really depends upon the types of structures and the occupancies that we will be developing. If Block 164, for example, became 4 separate towers or 4 different subdevelopments, there is emergency vehicle access that'll be required. So this is not a walled-off entity. This is a public thoroughfare. So I don't know exactly that 13th Street, the currently vacated 14th Street and or 13th Street will be replaced, but there will be some pedestrian connectivity from I-35 southbound through the campus. The Waller Creek Conservancy and Waterloo Park are basically planned and under construction in this location. We are planning to maintain that connectivity.
Okay. And then I was a little confused by the what's next section on page 2. I understand that you are in the process of demolition, and then you would like the property rezoned. Can you shed any light on the expected timetable for the rezoning? And then is there anything you could share about the steps beyond rezoning?
Zoning is an interesting process in the city of Austin and any other jurisdiction where I've done this. So I cannot really talk to that. We hope that between now and the end of, say, our fiscal year, September, October timeframe, we will have a zoning overlay on this. We are, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're in negotiations with the city on an interlocal agreement on Red River that actually ties to a rezoning or a zoning overlay of the campus. We are making these efforts now because basically it gives us a site ready for development. Entitlements and unknowns on zoning and utilities infrastructure to a commercial developer are risks. And if you have a risk, they have to protect money at it, so it reduces the return. Basically, we are trying to eliminate as many of the risks as possible for future development. As to what the final steps will be, there are portions of the overall area that are in play in terms of the interlocal agreement. If that goes well, that will suggest potentially step 1 or 2 steps at the same time in terms of potential RFP or negotiations with other developers. So again, our efforts are really to maximize the land value. By rezoning this, by gaining the entitlements, we're tripling the value of the land for Central Health. That is huge.
Do you foresee another long-term lease as opposed to a sale?
Potentially. I think we are open to anything and everything. By that, joint ventures, I don't know that Central Health would initiate development of their own, but again, we want to remain flexible. If the right opportunity came and it made sense and the board approved it, we might try to joint venture or do something of our own initiative.
So you expect rezoning to occur this year, and then some sort of procurement process after that could involve an RFP or some other process to get offers on the land after it's rezoned.
That is correct.
Right. Yes. Right. So rezoning and demolition this year. Right. Rezoning and demolition this year, followed by some sort of process that will make the property available under the new zoning.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yep. And I was going to say, Stephen, you may want to follow up a little bit about the master plan. The vision of the plan that I think former Councilmember Riley is talking about is still in place in terms of a walkable community. And you had mentioned with this new direction, there will be fewer streets, less traffic, perhaps, than there would have been a couple of years ago. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. The master plan is a guidance document on simple economics. The master plan shows more than 4 acres of roadways. In current Austin terms, very conservatively, very safely, each acre of development by a simple central business district overlay is probably worth $15 million of annual revenue to the developer. If everything goes well, then it will be significantly more. So to forego $60 million by definitely plugging all of these interior roads is from a commercial developer perspective, from the potential revenue to Central Health, that's probably not the best thing that we want to do. So we want to, and as Mr. Geeson pointed out, if you want a pedestrian-friendly environment, take the vehicles off. There will be some road, some sort of passage infrastructure. Emergency vehicles will need to be there. The occasional Austin Energy truck vehicle will need to be there. But put in pedestrian rated pavement. So emergency vehicles can gain access through bollards and things like that. But if you limit the amount of traffic in there, it's a much more inviting environment overall.
So Barry McBee, a member of but not representing the Sweet Hill Neighborhood Association. So this may be in the master plan, and if so, I apologize for not knowing the details, or it may be worked out in the zoning process. But height restrictions on the buildings, particularly with the sensitive capital, not a view corridor, but the capital views. And then also taking into account what is already a very busy intersection at 15th and 35. Where are those addressed, or will they be addressed?
On the traffic aspects, yes, any future development has to do with TIA, traffic impact analysis. That will be performed depending upon the type and scope of building that would come in terms of development. So we have control of that. The 2033 fund just completed a TIA, traffic impact analysis, assessing what they're planning to do for their new office building. And that's also tied into the Red River potential relocation of Red River.
What about height?
Height? In negotiations with the city, but to be honest, we want to get as much volume as we can. This is not downtown Congress yet, but we want this to be an attractive, high-density urban environment for Central Health. And again, we're not, to put it bluntly, and apologies, we're not greedy developers, but we're any revenue that we can gain from a increased floor area ratio density, any buildings that we construct higher than we might have thought initially, translates into revenue to support Central Health's mission.
Speaking of height, about a year ago or so, there was a big concern about the Capitol View corridor. And then it just the Capitol View corridor and the buildings that were contemplated, did that go away, or what happened to that? Do y'all remember? Or Houston, I think, started it.
I mean, as far as we know at this point, and I'll ask Stephen at Berlagavassos to correct me on this if there's updated information. Staff loves it when I call them out from the crowd. But right now, the current Capitol View corridors presents a favorable environment to develop this and to be able to maximize the revenue for our mission. So that's where we are. But again, ultimately, it remains to be seen in terms of what the city decides on those corridors. And obviously, we may have to adjust accordingly. But our hope is that they'll understand this master plan that was put together with the community. This is what we're trying to do with this property. It's not like we're sending the money to Wall Street. This is going to get plowed right back into healthcare for Travis County. And so hence, sticking with the current Capitol View corridors.
Hi, Ellen Richards, Integral Care again. So I know you've already said this, but I just want to spell it out. So the future uses on this property the goal is maximization of revenue so that y'all can generate that to put back into healthcare services elsewhere.
Correct.
But the future use would not include anything like housing for your clients or medical services for your clients or any kind of public use, what I would consider sort of a public use that benefits your clientele specifically.
So all of that are options that are on the table at this point. In fact, if you go back to the master plan under the second section, I believe under stewardship, it talks about working not only with housing, but other health, medical, biotechnology, innovation, entrepreneurial, so that you have this mix of things happening on this campus. And to the extent that absolutely that they can benefit our clients, I mean, that's something that the board is going to consider. I mean, those are the MAP and the sliding fee scale patients are who we care for. But just to spell it out for you, it's a delicate balance because on the one hand, if this master plan is saying maximize the revenue for the mission of Central Health, then we have to be real careful about what that mix is. And it's not that we're going to be landlords charging people rent. We're asking these developers to come onto this property, it could be more than one, and we're saying take some risk. Develop this, try to get the right blend of uses that ultimately the board will need to decide and direct, including benefiting our clients. And then obviously we start to see things take shape, and we'll start to know once those developers start submitting those proposals. And if I'm getting ahead of myself, stop me. But a lot of it depends on the programming and the marketing and the leasing that takes place. Well, then we can start to answer the questions. Okay, here's what this mix will finally look like. Because just because you start out planning for something, a lot of it depends on the economics, which you don't control in terms of ultimately whether or not you're able to hit your programming at 100% or 80%. But there's all kinds of ideas that have been put forward. So, for example, hotel or temporary housing for families that have patients across the street at the hospital that are there either for short or extended stays, and something that is workable for them. Workforce housing is another one idea that has been put forward. So there's any number of options that can go into this that ultimately would benefit our clients. Excuse me, the people that we serve. They're not clients.
I just wanted to add one more note about the...
Hang on a second. Hang on. I think we had a hand over here. And we'll come back to you, Chris. I'm sorry.
My name is Barbara Wilson. I'm just a concerned citizen.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. My question is, you keep alluding to the master plan and also to the guiding principles of the master plan. What are those? Mission,
stewardship, and partnership. Okay. Those are the guiding principles, and they're spelled out. And in our, I'm not going to sit down and do an hours-long reading of the master plan, so don't worry. I just wanted to make sure I'm referencing this. But under each one of those principles is a column of different ways to achieve those principles. And it's a set of guideposts, if you will, for the Board of Managers and other people that are participating in this process, just like you all, to say, okay, here's some ways to achieve and stick to those core principles of mission, stewardship, and partnership. And it's all spelled out in our master plan. It's available online, and it looks kind of like this. I've marked this one up, but it goes down and it gives you different options and avenues to be able to fulfill that. But it's spelled out quite nicely, and take a look at it. And we can give you the links to that. It's called the Brackenridge Campus Master Plan. You're welcome. That's on our website. Yes, ma'am. You got it back. Go ahead. Yeah.
Again, this is Chris Riley again with the Downtown Austin Neighborhood Association, and I just wanted to add one more word on the uses. I really appreciate your interest in making this area pedestrian friendly, but I wanted to emphasize that if you don't have the right uses, then just keeping cars off the street is not going to make it pedestrian friendly.
Right.
Medical districts.
Like if it's all office space, for example.
Exactly. If we plunk down another office building like you just did with 164, that's not going to make this an appealing area. Or if it's entirely medical districts are not really being known for great pedestrian friendly destinations where people are coming to walk around. They generally they tend to be very sterile and boring places where people don't want to go unless they really have to. So I would encourage you. I will review the master plan, but I'm hopeful that it emphasizes the need for a healthy mix of uses and a coherent street grid that makes this an inviting place to walk, and that means not just a safe walk, but a useful and interesting walk. And having a diverse mix of uses would really add to that. And so, so we need to really be mindful of that before we go plunk down another single-use function on one of these blocks, because that would really, there's a real risk of making this, of perpetuating the kind of thing that we've been seeing in the so-called innovation district, which no one would ever voluntarily go walk around, because there's just no reason to. It's off-putting. That whole quadrant of downtown used to be a very vibrant, lively place, and thanks to the efforts of public entities, especially the state, it has become just a dead zone where no one would ever choose to go. And so really, there's a lot of experience to learn from, and I think when we look at actual vibrant, inviting, healthy cities, we see a much different thing. We see a lot of a real healthy mix of uses with very pleasant streetscapes. And so I hope you'll keep that all in mind.
And there's sections in the master plan, just for reference as you're looking around. One is the framework of streets and open spaces, and it goes in to talk about streets and transit and pedestrians and bicycles. But then it goes on further to talk about the gathering places. What's the green infrastructure that we can put in? Because you're right, you don't want it to be this. It needs to be vertical because that's what ultimately generates revenue for our mission, but you don't want it to be sterile, to your point. And also the building massing and the different programming around health and innovation. So there's a lot that needs to go into this space. And if somebody were just to come in off the street, it hasn't been involved at this at all, and they were to pick up this master plan and start working on it, I think they would have to work very, very hard to actually make it cold and sterile and unenjoyable and not usable by the public because of the amount of time and effort that went into this thing. Is there some place that you've been to in the United States or here in Texas that you feel like, wow, they really did it right there? They got it right. Where would that be?
Generally, the oldest parts.
I'm not paying for a field trip, but I would like to know.
The oldest parts of almost any city, including
the oldest parts,
including Austin, San Antonio. Yeah.
So those places that maybe were first laid out before there were as many cars.
That had a coherent street grid, that had small lots, that had a lot of connectivity, that had a healthy mix of uses.
Sure.
A wide variety of uses in a small walkable area.
But is there any one particular city that, outside of Austin, San Antonio, that you feel like that has done a modern day redevelopment like this that really got it right?
A modern day redevelopment?
Past 10 years, not that modern.
In Texas?
Anywhere.
I'll have to think on that one. I can think of lots of places in New York, Chicago.
Chicago's got some interesting places, yeah. Okay. Well, think about it. I appreciate the impact. I know, Dr. Cooper, you just hand that microphone up behind you.
I thought the Pearl Brewery site in San Antonio.
Oh, yeah. 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 They did a good job with it. Thank you. What else? Kind of look over here. Yes. All right. Hi, Katie.
I want to make sure I understand when you're talking about this. You talk about you want to bring in as much revenue as possible for healthcare for Travis County residents. Can you talk to me about what that's going toward exactly? Like, is that just kind of generally going toward the general fund, or is it going to specific programs?
Right. So all of our revenue sources are all budgeted at once, meaning we don't have like dedicated revenue streams or buckets like what the state of Texas has. And there are some restrictions on how we can use money, don't get me wrong, but 4% of our funds, right around $10 million, and this is in today's budget, go to administration. 96 cents of every dollar goes into healthcare delivery, some way, somehow. It's hospital care, it's primary care, it's specialty care, it's enrollment eligibility, that is connecting with people to let them know, here's the programs that are available to you. It's outreach. I know we've really amped up our outreach, if you will, not just on social media. And for those of you that are following us, thank you very much, and retweeting and reposting, thank you. But it's also person-to-person outreach and setting up advisory committees in the communities that Mr. Wallace spoke of. It's about paying for health care. I said primary and specialty, those are lines of service. It's also about looking at the expansion in eastern Travis County, getting out to Austin Colony, Hornsby Bend, Creedmoor, Colony Park, fast growing areas like Pflugerville and Manor. It's the geography of health as much as it is the line of service around health. And so when you look at the central health budget, all that's available on our website. We summarize it, and then we start breaking it down, and you can see exactly where all of those dollars flow into. And, that's, in fact, our budget preparation is started, and so that's coming up, and you'll have many opportunities to weigh in on that and ask questions as well.
And so kind of just into a general fund then, kind of.
Yes, but we don't call it general fund. Like how the state has the general fund, we don't necessarily have a fund title to that. It's just You can see it in our budgets and our audits and all of our monthly financial statements, which are online. All of those revenues are used to fund the sources are used to fund the uses. And it's all blended together to be able to make it happen.
Thank you.
And our revenue sources along those lines, we have property tax revenue. We have a little bit of lease revenue, as you can see. We also have revenues that come from the tobacco settlement. You all may remember that from a few decades back. And then there's some other miscellaneous that comes in mostly through investment income. But our biggest chunk of revenue comes from the property taxes. And then we use that to bring down federal funds to augment the spending that we do at the local level into healthcare.
I would just want to make one comment for you, if you don't mind. If you were to look at the map of Travis County, and if you could go back to that, and if you
Please.
could superimpose the map of Travis County that has been provided to us by Jason Fournier, who's the CEO for Community Care, where he talks in terms of, and we have it in our materials also for Central Health, that talk about where people are that have the greatest needs and where the clinic systems are located and the healthcare providers are located. They're not along 35. So when we talk about looking at being visionary and being forward-thinking and knowing and internalizing the fact that we were the most segregated city in the United States, we've displaced thousands and thousands of families from the areas that used to be close to the compact inner city, and they have now moved outside of that area, but there is no infrastructure. There are no urban districts. There are no pharmacies. There are no clinics. There's no grocery stores, there's no transportation, there's no bus system, there's nothing out there. Those are the investments those are the things that we have to look at for seeing how can we take care of our patients that need it most, according to the statute that we were created to abide by. And so if you look at our targeted population, you see where the needs are, where they're living, and you see what has been provided to date, then what we want to do is put them in a place where they will have access to all those very things that have been kept from them historically. So that's what we're talking about doing. And we do that through our budget process. And thank goodness for the budget process that we do have flexibility. And if there's something that will not necessarily pan out during that budget season within your area, monies can be utilized for the same kind of thing in the same general area according to the way the budget has been developed and approved, but always based on the priorities and always based on our commitment to completing our mission and doing what is best for the community that needs our care the most.
Yeah. Thank you, Manager Valdez. Well said.
Anybody have any other questions? Mike, you and Stephen both touched on this. I want to maybe reiterate the shift from Central Health issuing an RFP for a master developer.
Yes.
And then what happened next. So there was an RFP, there were responses that were evaluated, but then can you talk about what happened next?
Sure. So this would have been in 2017, an RFP was issued for a master developer. And as Ted mentioned, there were a number of responses on that. And ultimately, I think it came down to 2, if I remember correctly, responses. And we received board permission to begin negotiations with one of those respondents. And in the course of these, and actually, it's important to remember that in the RFP that went out, Central Health, and I give the Board of Managers credit for doing this, but they reserved the right to look at different options. And so everybody that responded to that RFP was put on notice. We may decide to do something different, but bring us your best case, if you will. And that's my way of summarizing it and thinking about it. But nonetheless, after those responses came in, we received permission from the board to begin negotiations with one preferred master developer for this is Travis County, not for Travis County, but for the entire blocks that were on the previous slide. And so in the course of those negotiations, we realized there's an economic issue here. If the master plan tells us to maximize the revenue for the mission of Central Health, But yet, if you have a master developer that comes on board and they take on all of this risk, you pay a premium for that. You may not have any cash outlay as the property owner, but the way you pay that premium is through a reduced economic impact over time. And we realized that, and again, exercising the privilege that was in that RFP, that we needed to take a different look at this. And I think the master developer decided, there's a lot of risk here, there's some uncertainties here, this isn't for us, and so amicably, we parted ways. And that's what brings us here today. Now, is that a bad thing? Not really. Remember, we're on a long time stretch here. I mean, this master plan contemplates out to 2035. But in that intervening time, it allowed us to go back to the board to say, look, we tried this master developer route, the economics weren't working out for either side, and we need to look at this maybe parcel by parcel and even looking at how we carve this up north, south, east, west in terms of these different parcels. But it also allowed us to get started on discussions with the city around realigning Red River. It allowed us to bring on board the 2033 lease, which starts generating revenue this year, as opposed to waiting 10, 15 years before any revenue started showing up. And then, of course, it allowed us to start with the process of picking a firm to come in and demolish the building here on these two blocks to scrape the site clean and get going on the development, make it a little bit more attractive. So time well spent in the interim, and we've learned a lot. And so one of the next decisions that the board of managers will need to make is, how do we proceed with these remaining parcels? And is it one, or is it multiple development opportunities or ventures, if you will? And how does that look? And so it's our job as management to present all these different options, and as the public, everybody's going to have a chance to see this. There's going to be full line of sight and transparency. But then ultimately, we'll need to start making some decisions from now throughout, ongoing, as to how we develop the rest of this property.
Other questions?
Can I say one last closing thing? Anais, thank you for sharing your family story with us. I think that made the video, so thank you very much. We appreciate that, Anais. And thank you all for coming out. We have a lot of community engagement opportunities ahead on this. Check out the website, check out the master plan. We'll hang around tonight if you want to visit with any of us. So we really appreciate the input and the questions. Thank you.